Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryent, here for a Podicus Magnus episode, which means Peter is here. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
And, of course, my permanent guest, Cammy. Hello, Cammy.
Hello, all.
Oh, I thought you were gone, Cammy. That was a really long pause.
She just walked out.
Yeah, she's done. So, everyone, this is Mythstorie. Every week we'll pull a myth or historical tale. We'll rip it out to you, and then we'll kind of discuss some of the facts behind it. Well, facts, the things that I found on the internet. And this is a Podicus Magnus episode, which means that instead of it just being me and Cammy, we've got our very special guest Peter here, and we are not thankfully, it's okay to talk about Greek stuff. I was going to say we're thankfully moving away from Greek stuff for this episode, but
are we?
Yeah,
it's a little bit of Greek.
That's true.
One third Greek.
Right. Yeah. No. So today we're going to dive in. I had an idea, so I'm going to just steal all the credit for it because it was my idea alone to talk about automatons, because that word is so much fun to say. And I think that it has been responded well by my co-guests here. Co-guests. Oh man, I just demoted both of you, I think. Just my guests, my permanent guests. So Peter.
It's Bryant's show.
Yeah, right, I know.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, what is an automaton for the uninitiated?
I know. Well, gosh, now that's what we were kind of talking about, because you're going to go into a unique way into it. But an automaton, it's an old Greek word that kind of means it means acting of one's own will, and it refers to typically like a mechanical object that can move essentially on its own, or unassisted, or without having a person directly move it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll kind of get into it in my little part, but automatons are kind of called the predecessor to a robot, a modern day robot.
Right.
But you have an interesting take on it. Why don't you tell us?
Well, I was a little conflicted about choosing my subject because I wasn't sure if it was an automaton or not. But I think on reflection that it may be kind of the proto-automaton. I'm going to be talking about the golem from Jewish folklore, particularly the Golem of Prague.
Not to be confused with Gollum, who took the One Ring. And
right.
Yeah, two different people, different spellings.
That's what you guys were talking about.
Yes.
Did not get that earlier.
I have been saying Gollum all week, and my daughter stopped me and corrected me today. It's like, Father, it's Golem. Actually,
that's funny.
In Yiddish, I believe it's Golem, but I'm gonna stick with Golem today.
No, that's cool. Yeah, Gollum is spelled distinctively differently, but it's funny when you look up Golem on Wikipedia, it'll be like, "Did you mean Gollum?"
Mm-hmm.
So
is it that much more popular?
I think it's the mistake people make.
Okay.
I think that you're Googling it and you're like, oh, what was that little dude from Lord of the Rings name? And you'll type in Golem because you heard of Golem from Pokemon or something, and that pops up. So they're like, we got you.
Yes, I did run across a lot of images of the Pokemon in my research.
Which has little to do with it anyway. It's an animal. Anyway. Well, Peter, please enrich our lives with your story of the Golem of Prague.
I am so excited to share this with you guys. So there are lots of versions of this story, and I've borrowed from several of them. Honestly, my favorite telling of this story came from the tourism bureau. The tourism bureau of the city of Prague. We're very proud of the story, and they had a really nice summary. So that was kind of my inspiration for this. But a lot of this is from me. So I had a lot of fun writing this, and I hope you all like it too. And here we go. Along the banks of the river Vltava, the city of Prague sparkles like the finest jewel in all of Bohemia. The city's gilded facades radiate like a captured sun that not even the darkest night can dampen. Great spires seem to sprout from the castle and the cathedrals in a race towards the very heavens. It is the year of our Lord 1600, and Prague is the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. Rudolph II sits on the throne, and he has ushered in a golden age of religious tolerance, scientific curiosity, and the patronage of the arts. Having been expelled from the city in 1561, the Jewish community has returned to Prague and rebuilt their neighborhood in the north of the city by the Great Bend in the river Vltava. But all is not well. It is no secret that Emperor Rudolph dabbles in the occult sciences. The astrologer Nostradamus has been invited to court and has written a horoscope for the king. Rudolph practices alchemy and has spared no expense in his pursuit of the Philosopher's Stone. And the astronomer Tycho Brahe has brought his infernal telescopes to court and pointed their lenses at the very face of God. An air of suspicion and paranoia has settled over the city, and many of its citizens believe its source lies in the Jewish quarter. Their strange language and customs make the Jews an easy target, and rumors abound of unspeakable crimes happening in their part of the city. At night, vigilante mobs roam the streets of the Jewish quarter, burning homes and beating any Jews they deem suspicious. The city guard has even refused to patrol the Jewish quarter, leaving its residents dangerously exposed. The streets of the Jewish quarter are dark. Even the oil lamps. Oh no. Sorry, guys.
You good?
I had a pop-up block my story.
It's okay.
The streets of the Jewish quarter are dark. Even the oil lamps outside the new synagogue have been extinguished. People are afraid to burn candles at night in case it might attract some roving mob. But there is one light still burning. In his tiny apartment by the synagogue, Rabbi Lowe squints through candlelight at an old, well-thumbed book. Surely there must be some way to protect his people. Perhaps the Kabbalah, a collection of ancient Jewish mysticism, will hold the answer. He discovers instructions for bringing a clay figure to life, just as God molded Adam from the soil. Perhaps Rabbi Lowe could build such a champion to defend the Jews of Prague. The next day, Rabbi Lowe brings a cart to the shores of the river and fills the cart with clay from the riverbank. Back in his tiny apartment, the rabbi begins forming the clay into the shape of a man. The rabbi is no artist, and the figure takes on a crude, rough shape. Its shoulders are broad, its head dome-shaped, its legs are as thick as tree trunks, and its hands resemble the mittens worn by children on cold winter days. The rabbi presses his thumbs into the thing's face to make two eyes and adores them with some bits of old crystal he found in a drawer. Finally, the rabbi presses wooden letters into the thing's brow. The letters spell out Emet, the word for truth. When this word is spoken, the great clay figure should come to life. The rabbi names the clay figure Golem, meaning formless one. The time has come to test this bizarre creation. Emet, says the rabbi, but nothing happens. Flustered, the rabbi returns to his books. Perhaps he has missed some crucial step. He reads late into the night, but finally it is time to go to bed. His candle extinguished, Rabbi Lowe makes his way through the darkness to his waiting bed. But he notices the room is strangely illuminated. He looks down at the floor and notices the golem's eyes are glowing faintly. Rise, says the rabbi. Like a hinge, the golem sits up. The floorboards groan as it stands to its full height. Its head nearly touches the ceiling. It is a cold night, and a fire would be nice. Bring firewood, says the rabbi. The golem silently obeys, lumbering straight through the front door and tearing it from its hinges.
Hmm.
The rabbi's cart stands in the street, and the golem makes right for it, smashing it into kindling with its mighty arms. Horrified, the rabbi rushes to the golem's side. He can just barely reach the letters on the golem's head. He removes the letter E. Met, shouts the rabbi, and the golem stops dead. The golem works, but the rabbi must be more careful with the instructions he gives to the creature. In the weeks that follow, the rabbi becomes more confident in commanding the golem. During the day, he orders the golem to fetch water and pull heavy carts, and at night, the golem patrols the streets. The children, initially frightened of the creature, have grown to love their silent sentinel. They climb onto its broad shoulders and put crowns of flowers on its head. Rabbi Lowe begins to notice that the golem is growing. It's as if every day the golem absorbs the dirt from the street and dust in the air and makes them part of itself. Worried that the golem may grow too large to control, the rabbi wraps wide straps of leather around the golem's limbs and places a great collar of iron around its neck to stop the golem from growing. He also allows the golem to rest on the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, the rabbi directs the golem to a shaded courtyard where he removes the letter E from its forehead and speaks the word Met, the word for death. On these days of rest, the golem receives a secret visitor. The rabbi's neighbor, a young woman named Sarah, has become curious about the mysterious creature. Sarah is dazzled by the displays of public art throughout the city and longs to become a sculptor, but her family has forbidden it. She is drawn to the golem's crude form as a master sculptor is drawn to a block of the finest marble. In secret, she begins reforming and improving the creature. First, she transforms his rough mitts into strong, articulate fingers. Its legs, like ruddy cylinders, she sculpts into athletic calves and powerful thighs. Finally, the golem's head, literally a great lump of clay, she molds into a fine, strong face, with a firm brow, a broad nose, and sharp cheekbones. Once she finishes sculpting the golem's lips, Sarah gives the creature a playful kiss. It may be some trick of the light, but Sarah seems to notice a soft glow emanating from the golem's crystal eyes. But this is impossible. The letter E that will bring the golem to life is safe in the pocket of Rabbi Lowe. The streets of the Jewish quarter have been made safe again. Outsiders, fearful of the golem, no longer make trouble for the Jews. But word of the golem has reached the palace. What was this strange power that could bring a clay figure to life? Perhaps the rabbi might be harboring other secrets like the formulas of alchemy. Emperor Rudolph dispatches a battalion of troops to capture Rabbi Lowe and his golem and bring them back to the palace. It is a cold afternoon, and Rabbi Lowe is helping lay the foundations of a new synagogue. He commands the golem to drive wooden piers into the hard ground. Suddenly, he is alerted to a great commotion. A noisy crowd has gathered around them, and over their heads, the rabbi sees a column of troops advancing down the street. It is clear that the soldiers are there for the golem. The troops carry long pikes and coils of thick rope. The mounted cavalrymen have unsheathed their curved sabers, and a web of nets dangle from their saddles. Rabbi Lowe is a peaceful man and plans to surrender without resistance, but the crowd is unruly. Protective of their silent champion and emboldened by his enormous strength, the crowd forms a wall between the golem and the advancing soldiers. Sarah is among them, and the golem pauses in its work and turns its glowing eyes to look at her. The crowd has begun clashing with the soldiers, and they call out to the rabbi to send the golem to their aid. The rabbi orders the golem to stop, which it does. It stares mutely at the crowd as the rabbi fetches a ladder to climb up and remove the E from the golem's forehead. But suddenly, a scream splits the cold tension in the air. A cavalry horse, frightened by the pressing crowd, rears back, nearly bucking off its rider. It flails its front hooves, freshly shoed in gleaming steel. It kicks wildly, striking down Sarah, who's become entangled in the crowd. In an instant, the golem begins moving purposely toward the fallen woman. The ladder clatters to the ground, pinning Rabbi Lo beneath it. The crowd parts as the golem makes its way to Sarah, now surrounded by a circle of wailing women. As it bends over her fragile body, the soldiers surround the creature, throwing ropes across its wide back and shoulders. The wild horse that struck down Sarah has retreated to the rear of the advancing ranks of infantry. The golem slowly rises and wades into the rows of soldiers, dragging armored men behind it as if they weighed nothing. Soldiers plunge their spears into the golem, where they protrude like the quills of a porcupine before being absorbed into the golem's clay form. With every step and every attack, the golem grows larger. The leather straps and iron collar designed to contain the golem burst apart as he walks slowly but unceasingly. Fallen soldiers are pulverized beneath its feet. It gathers 3 men in a great bear hug and crushes them against its broad chest. The commander sounds the retreat and the soldiers turn and run in a disorderly mass away from the advancing golem. They may be able to outrun it, but they know in their hearts that the creature will never stop until every one of them is dead. The golem is now as tall as a house, and although its steps are slow, its strides are enormous. It will reach the boundary of the Jewish quarter any minute, and God knows what destruction he would cause if he let loose in the great city. There may be one final chance to stop it. Ahead of the golem's path, a footbridge spans the street connecting 2 warehouses, and it is there that Rabbi Lo runs as fast as his old legs can manage. Positioning himself on the bridge, the rabbi can see that the golem will pass directly under him. Lying on his belly, the rabbi reaches out dangerously as the golem passes beneath him. His hands close around the letter E. Met, he cries, and the golem freezes in mid-stride. Its forward momentum causes the creature to teeter and crash into the warehouse, shaking the footbridge and nearly throwing Rabbi Lo to the ground. The rabbi looks down at the motionless golem. Its gleaming skin is now stained with blood and covered with saber cuts. He looks back at the golem's destructive path and vows never to use its power again. No man should ever use such power. What would happen, he thinks, if others learned the secrets of the golem? Would the king not build an army of golems to carry out his wars? Rabbi Lo resolves to destroy his mystical books and hide the golem away. Before the soldiers return, the Jews must dispose of the golem. Using great saws, they remove its enormous limbs and cart them away. The pieces of the golem are hidden away in the attic of the new synagogue, and they are said to lay there still, awaiting the day when it might be needed again to defend the Jews of Prague.
Wow, that was
So
that was great.
yeah, it was really good. So how much of that was like kind of based in your actual reading, and how much? I mean, I know you said like it was loosely based.
I mean, I would say, like the plot of the story is quite short. Like I didn't read. There are like long versions of this story, but I did not consult them. So I basically took like a brief summary and I just kind of ran with it.
Yeah, that was great.
That's really cool. I liked it.
Thanks.
Come on, Rabbi Lo. He needs. I'm surprised.
And Rabbi Lo, I believe, was a real person. So Emperor Rudolph II and Rabbi Lo were real people. But I invented Sarah, and and a lot.
No, I liked her glow up that she gave him, the golem. That was great. I was like, I could totally see. I I totally get what you mean. We were briefly talking about this before, about how this is like a precursor to like RoboCop, Terminator. Like I love it.
Yeah.
I even thought of did you Peter, did you see the latest Spider-Man movie, Far From Home?
Yes.
Do you remember when he's fighting the fire elemental and it's absorbing all the metal and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like when the
Oh,
soldiers
cool.
were stabbing it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Was that I'm sure that there's some sort of illusion there too.
This was so fun to write. Like it really, like as I was writing it, like more stuff came to me. I was like, oh, like I could have gone. This is it's probably the longest piece I've written for the podcast, but I could have been much longer. I had to really
Sure.
stop myself from overwriting.
It was fun. That was really great. Well, that was an excellent primer into everything. Cammy, I know you're going into something that my research did specifically mention, and that is Talos.
Did you say Talos or Talos?
Yes.
Tell us about Talos.
See, there we go.
Yeah, so I got my information from the Arnautica by Apollonius Rhodius.
Great guy.
And yeah, and it's basically the story of Jason and the Argonauts. And I picked up just particularly the story of Talos, but I figure I'd kind of prime it with we are talking about Jason and the Argonauts with this. But yeah, Jason and his band of heroes on the Argo have just received the Golden Fleece and are on their way back to Icolus via Crete. When they sail towards the nearing shore, a giant, made of bronze, begins tossing huge stones at the ship. He towered over the cliffs, where he would retrieve the rock by breaking off the cliff face. Talos, created by the great Hephaestus, given to Europa by Kronos to protect Crete. This gleamy marvel trode the shores 3 times a day, always ready to defend his home. Though he was a mammoth of bronze, he had one design which made him mortal, a single vein which carried in it all that gives humans passion for their homeland, the instinct to protect and to defend and to have malice, every sense a mortal possesses, in one blood-red path from his ankle to his head. The Argo's crew retreated from the deadly rocks to form a plan. It was Medea who spoke first. I can bring you safe passage, but you must not engage him with your weapons. The place we must strike is too small. The Argo sailed out of the stone's range, while the woman summoned her power. With it, spirits of death, hungry for loss, and Hades' dogs, swift of foot, came from Gaia herself. 3 times she prayed to the Ancient Ones. 3 times she sang their summoning song. Then she locked eyes with the towering man, much more a man now in her gaze, for that scarlet vein, which hid behind his thin ankle flesh, carried with it desire and fear and longing. Her teeth began to chatter like a cat singing back his bewitching song to a bird, and from her sound, phantom beasts were summoned too. Talos did the only action expected of him. He tore the cliff face and flung mighty rocks at his foes. But in his fearful state, a frenzy came over him. He worked swiftly, but one of the jagged rocks that he had torn grazed his ankle in the confusion as he dropped it. His life burst from that one weak spot onto the ground beneath him. For moments he stood swaying, then he fell like a mighty oak to the sand below him. The giant was slaughtered, but no safety came from it, for all of Hades had risen to the earth. Jason pleaded to Apollo to save his ship and crew. Through his tears, Jason saw the gleaming bow of Apollo. The sky cleared, and a golden light led the way to safety. And though the island where they landed was barren, they sacrificed all they could to their savior. And that's the story of Talos' death.
Can a automaton die? Is the
That's the
golem dead,
question.
or is it just deactivated? If I put Cammy, is your old iPad 2 dead or is it just inactive?
The cat
These are the-
plays with it occasionally.
These are the questions of automata. Great. That was great, Cammy. I never really heard of Talos other than being like an artificial, being before. So that was a nice little way into it. I appreciate that. So this is a really interesting subject because it's sort of like deceptively simple, and it kind of nice because it's pretty straightforward. Now I'll quiz you guys. Where do you think the first? Who do you think used the word first? Ancient?
The French.
No. Close.
Use the word automaton?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
like the actual word automaton, or just
the oldest like reference to the word being used in the Greek style. So like and it means acting of one's own will. Do you have any ideas?
The
Going
1600s.
once? No, even way, but we're BCE.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
wow,
Homer.
That's crazy.
It was Homer
wow.
in the Iliad. To use it first in this way, and he was describing an automatic door opening and the automatic movement of wheeled tripods. So he was sort of the first one to talk about a device that moved on its own, essentially, and that's sort of like the beginnings of it. Now it goes a little further, or closer, I should say, down the timeline into the 3rd century BCE is when it kind of comes back up. But obviously, so like Hephaestus, there's references of him having automata, and these stories go beyond time, from what we know, of course. But there, the next big one, it's called Archytas's dove. Of 350 BC, and that's Archytas of Tarentum. He was a friend of Plato. Who isn't a friend of Plato? And this dove, it was like a wooden pigeon. There's writings of it that were found in like the medieval period, basically, or they resurged in the medieval period. And were used. But anyway, it was like a dove that would move on its own thanks to compressed air. That was like its trick. So I thought that was really interesting. But so the automaton is a Greek word, and its beginnings are Greek for sure. But yeah, Homer's sort of the one that we can kind of credit for having the primary source of using that word, which is really cool because it's just interesting to trace it like that into the Iliad. And then it kind of bounces around a little bit. We can hear, like I said, Archytas, Plato's time, there's designs and these things that kind of came from, and those designs actually resurged in the 9th century. The Islamic world was, in its golden age of mathematics and everything. And there was this guy, Al-Jazari, he was someone who made a lot of these things. And also going into the Renaissance period, Arabic scripts of old Greek writings were translated into the modern languages of Europe, and from ancient Greek to Arabic and so on. So it was cool. It kind of made a resurgence after being gone for so long. But automatons, they funny enough too, independently in China in the 3rd century BCE, there were some references as well, but it didn't come back until the 6th century CE that we have these records of like flying birds and other things that kind of moved on their own. It was all basically animals and things like that. But then in China, it completely broke out before the Renaissance period. It really only continued into medieval Europe and the Renaissance. And it got really popular in the 16th century. That's when we had some really crazy designs. There were these special paintings that were made that would kind of like move on their own. There were these little like pictures that would move on their own.
Oh, that is so neat.
Yeah.
And some of those like elaborate like clocks around Europe.
And that is another, like, I mean, a clock is essentially an automaton as well.
Thought of it that way, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot to precede with my sources, so I'll kind of do it as I go through. But there's a lot of, when I was researching it, it was really interesting because a lot of websites like that you wouldn't expect to kind of talk about this stuff did, and it was actually really frustrating because a lot of crappy websites that like have nothing but ads had their own little thing. But there was a website called CompareTheCloud.net, which is like a networking site. It talks about AI and tech, future tech, and stuff like that. And in their whole article, and what a lot of these other articles, though this one was less spammy, talk about it, this is the predecessor to the robot, basically. And it's really interesting. They would typically talk about like Leonardo da Vinci's mechanical designs. Obviously, he was toiling around with a bunch of stuff. So but it's really interesting because the two periods they kind of focus on are the ancient Greeks and the sort of the Renaissance going into the 17th, 16th, and 18th centuries. That's where it really, really kind of went up. Again, I think it's once those ancient Greek texts made their way through the Arabic lands and then were retranslated, all these guys were like, whoa, we can do that. So, oh, I forgot to mention too, there was another old Greek adventure, Ctesibios. He was actually from 285, so BCE, so a little bit after the Archytas's dove, but he had like water-powered automata, and he had an extremely accurate water clock that would be like considered one of the most accurate clocks for like 2,000 years after he actually made it too. So yeah, like there's a lot of these periods where automata kind of dip in and out, but it wasn't until kind of post-medieval Europe was when it's called sort of the Golden Age. There's a really famous one from the 16th century. It's this mechanical monk, and it has like Iberian Spanish origins, and it's just this little monk that moves on his own. And in the 1730s, this French inventor Jacques de Vaucanson, he made a.
Well done.
I know. He made a really fun one called the digesting duck, and it would like flap its wings, and even it would like eat. You could feed it grain, and it would poop out a little.
I used to have one of those.
Yeah, that's what I. Yeah,
it's like
so
a little chicken or something. It was a bird.
Yeah, it would eat grain, and this one would poop out little preloaded pellets. So, but yeah,
I've seen a diagram of that. It's fascinating.
Mine would eat. It was magnetized.
Right.
And mine would eat the magnets were pellets, and it would eat the magnet.
Yeah.
And then you had to like take them out. And then...
Right. And that's like, so like what we kind of consider like a pretty straightforward kid's toy today was like crazy awesome automata,
It was crazy awesome in the 80s as well.
Yeah. Now I don't have a date. I guess it's kind of, ancient. There was a kind of connecting to the Golem a little bit. There's an ancient Jewish legend. Solomon used his wisdom to design a throne with mechanical animals. So he would have a golden ox and a golden lion that would like move on their own and support him as he got up. But like funny enough, when Peter told me that you were doing the Golem, it didn't innately come up. Like it's like there's like the research that I have never talked about people made of clay, or I think the distinct thing is it's like humanity. So like that's like those sort of like things that were made human were never discussed in a way.
Yeah.
And I know
that's the big distinction. I mean, like, both
right.
Cammy and my stories are about like human figures brought to life through magic mostly. And like what you're talking about, like historical automatons, like people are doing, clocks and animals,
right.
but there's not a lot of human figures, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, like so, there's the monk, and even in China too, they would have like funny monk. Like there are lots of monks being like in a funny way, doing funny things. But yeah, that's they were it was tools. There's Hellenistic early, we call it a computer, like an analog computer. These sort of things. So these fascinating mechanical devices that acted on their own. And then there was, of course, it seemed like they were very practical in ancient times. I mean, other than just being marvelous feats. But yeah, it's interesting. I would thinking on it, I would definitely think of those stories as like automaton things. And my research did specifically mention Talos, also Daedalus. He used Quicksilver to instill with voices into moving statues. And I hadn't heard of, yeah, King Alcinous. Have you guys heard of that? Yeah, this was one that I hadn't really heard of either. It's a Greek myth. This king who had employed gold and silver watchdogs. So we'll have to do our own episode about him. But it's mentioned. It's like connected to the Argonauts, the Odyssey, things like that. Apparently, so. But anyway, yeah. So there's definitely the. It's just funny that my research sort of yielded like Wikipedia, Britannica, even History.com had a fun little list of these things, and they all mentioned. They would mention Talos, they would mention these things, but yeah, never Golem, never these things that were like almost had a weird level of sentience to them in a way. I don't know. So and I told you guys at the beginning that I could tie this to Byzantium. Well, I can. And in Lars Brownworth's book on the Normans, he talks about when a Norman, I can't remember if it was his name was probably Robert. They were all named Robert back then. Robert went to go visit the Byzantine emperor in the 10th century, and of course, like they would lavish you with gifts in the palace in Constantinople. And one of those things that you would see that was recorded being seen by the Normans, this Norman, was a mechanical golden lion that would move when you would like touch a lever on it. So
that sounds so cute.
I know, yeah. But yeah, so yeah, it's cool. There's like, I mean, automatons, they're still here. They're all around us.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the word is different now. I don't ask you like, where's your automaton? But
it's called a Roomba.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Breathe life into your Roomba and see. But yeah, there's a fun history to the what's again the predecessor to robots. But there's just a funny line between certain myths like that of the golem, and I'm sure there's countless other myths of the beings that maybe aren't human but are inhabitant pieces of life that or earth that have life given to them. But it's just funny, a fun little thing. So that's
Peter brought up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you remember when you were like, I don't know which one to do, and then we were talking about the Arabian Nights. There's a story of the city of brass, and there's a lot of things that if you touch it or if you walk on a certain path and that kind of thing, like things will turn a certain way, or
like a living city.
Yeah.
It's like a trap. Yeah,
that's cool. That's really cool.
I think what attracted me to the Golem story is like it references the creation of Adam, which I think is really fascinating. That that God creates this man out of the earth essentially and breathes life into him. And what's interesting, there's some parallels between the Golem story and the Adam story is this loss of control. Like you have this awesome power of being able to essentially create life, but then you can't control it. Like God let Adam play in the garden, but then he ate the from the tree of knowledge and he lost control of Adam. The same thing happened with the Golem. He was designed for a certain job, but kind of took on a life of its own, and they lost control. And I think we see that theme again and again. A lot of the real world automatons, like the historical ones that you're talking about, they're simple machines that you can control, but but there's always this kind of horror, this kind of fear that you're going to create something that you can't control. And I think we see that again and again in Frankenstein's monster and Terminator. All these we have this ability to create these amazing machines, but what happens when we lose control? And I think
Yeah,
It
yeah.
it's really
reminds me
interesting.
too of today, like when I mean, there's all these rules when you make AI that you have to follow,
Hmm.
and we kind of set out those rules because of human fears of what what if the AI can then
Sure.
control itself, and
Yeah,
then
yeah. The
we
rules
don't
and
have
stuff.
control
Yeah,
over it anymore. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
When
apparently that's been a long held fear of humans.
right. Well, what kind of inspired me into the idea was like in games like the Elder Scrolls and stuff like that, especially the dwarves in like ancient games, base games are the race of engineers and craftsmen and stuff like that, and they would in games like Elder Scrolls they made automatons. They these gold and bronze and metal made beings that move on their own and attack, and they're they're like robots, basically like magic robots.
That are
Um,
ridiculously hard to kill.
yeah, it's kind of stupid. I mean, well, shoot. I mean, Peter's story just told us, yeah, they're hard to
Yeah.
kill. Um, so it's taken a lot of different ways, and I think that kind of like is what sort of separated it for me. And I it's just there's a ton of different ways that this can go. The not just the robotics. This is like that's the tree. The top of the tree is robotics, and automaton is just one little stem on that tree, or vice versa, even. But it's really cool,
Yeah,
and
it seems like automatons are made for like a specific thing, like a clock tells time, and it doesn't do much else.
sure,
Whereas
yeah,
robots like have like a bunch of different functions that
sure,
they can perform, and more
yeah,
complicated functions.
yeah, absolutely. Well, this was a fun little dive. I'm glad it worked out better than I expected. So thanks so much,
I
guys.
really enjoyed
Such
it.
high
Yeah.
hopes.
Yeah, no, I knew this was kind of a shot in the dark, but and sometimes when I say something like do automatons, that's like a little too broad, but you guys did a great job really picking a specific subject. So I'm really pleased with how this went out, and I've learned a lot. So
Yeah, I had fun. I was a little worried at first that I wasn't going to find anything or be interested in what I found,
and then
And then it
ancient
was
Greece, ding
cool.
ding
Yeah,
ding.
ancient Greece.
Right,
Once
yeah. No,
again.
that's great. Yeah, there's something familiar, I think, on both ends for your guys' stories. So, like, the like the nature of it all is much closer or relative to other things than you might think. It's just it's weird. Like the whole time I was reading all this stuff, I was like, oh, huh. I mean, it's just great. So, well, guys, I think that just about does it. Unless someone's got something to add. But thanks again so much for your stories. That was really great.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for having
you.
me.
Yeah, thanks for coming up with the topic.
Yeah, no, don't worry. Any excuse to mention Byzantium, and I'll find a way.
Yeah, I would not have chosen this topic either, but I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Well, everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Mythstorie. I meant to mention at the beginning too. Obviously, we're still doing a remote recording, thanks to the end of the world. We'll try to get back to live, not remote recording whenever we can, but hopefully this is still working out for you. So let us know what you think. Join us on our Facebook group, Mythstorie with an IE. You can also hit us up at mythstorie@gmail.com. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Cammy. I'll see you guys next time.